topic for our second panel is all about the legal and regulatory framework, FinTech's Lifeline to Global Competitiveness. A report by the World Bank stated that entrepreneurs are largely discouraged by the administrative burdens placed on startups together with the complexity of regulatory procedures. But with the unprecedented acceleration of fintech brought about by the pandemic, authorities like the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the DTI, the Department of Information and Communication Technology, and the SEC were quick in readying a more modernized framework apt for a digital economy. We have a distinguished panel with us today, and to lead that panel, moderating, we have Ms. Ida Tiongson, CEO and President of Opal Portfolio Investments. Ms. Ida?
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Chino. Thank you, Singapore FinTech Festival, Geyser Maklang, for this privilege being part of the World FinTech Festival. May we start by just first giving a background of our topic, the legal and regulatory framework, FinTech's Lifeline to Global Competitiveness. This is a solid framework, a comprehensive, supportive legislation. They're vital to the development of an industry and unleashing its full potential. There are guidelines that can assist companies, organizations, LGUs, among others, to proceed to the next phase of their ongoing evolution. At the same time, they protect from the volatile markets, security risk, and economic disruptions. This panel will discuss the critical role that regional cross-border collaboration plays in forming this framework, as well as communities that can reap the benefits once their locators receive the flow of ideas and best practices from global players. To further discuss the kind of regulatory, legal, governance framework needed to support the growth of the fintech in the Philippines, we have our keynote speaker, Attorney Mark Gorriceta, Managing Partner of Gorosetta, Africa, Cauton, and Saavedra. He is the managing partner and the head of the corporate group of the said firm, and he is considered an expert in the fields of capital markets, mergers and acquisitions, and securities technology law in the Philippines. He is a pioneering expert on the law on digital assets, blockchain, virtual currencies, e-commerce, data privacy, and artificial intelligence. He is a legal counsel of some of the biggest and most impactful tech and online companies in the Philippines. Attorney Mark has been recognized as one of Philippines' top 100 lawyers for 2020 by the prestigious Asian Business Law Journal. He is also trustee and corporate secretary and chief legal officer of our FinTech Philippines Association. Please welcome Attorney Mark Gorosetta.
Thank you, Ida. Good afternoon. SEC Commissioner Amatong, BSP Director Mel Plabasan, Ms. Gemma Guerrero of JustPay.to, and to the entire FinTech community around the globe gathered here today. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be on this fine Tuesday. Again, I'm Mark Gorriceta. I am the managing partner and head of the corporate group of our firm, Gorriceta, Africa, Cauton, and Saavedra. I also head our tech media and telecommunications practice group in the firm. And it is with great honor and privilege that I give this keynote address for this afternoon's panel discussion. The topic for this afternoon captures the spirit of the times, the legal and regulatory framework, FinTech's lifeline to global competitiveness. We see changes in the political and economic landscapes, continuing regulatory reforms, technological innovations, and more interconnected goods and financial markets. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in an age of a historic transition brought about by technology. From desktop to cloud, from internet to social media, from physical banks and wallets to digital banking and e-wallets, we have definitely come a long way in a short time. The character of the global economy is changing. Technology is defining competitiveness and power in the new world. And it is creating boundless opportunities to transform lives. Across the world, this vision is rapidly changing into a reality. With digital financial services now the new norm, the rise of financial technology has led some people to ask whether it will replace certain services one day. I tend to think about it a bit differently, though. I'd like to know how technology can make it better. Renowned for their agility, adaptability, and digital fluency, fintechs are uniquely positioned to support the country's bid to shape a new economy that is more resilient, inclusive, and technology enabled. But the private sector cannot do this alone. To propel fintech's growth, a proactive government, especially monetary authorities, is needed to establish a regulatory environment that is supportive and conducive of digital innovations. A more supportive regulation of the country's financial technology sector should be in place to encourage stability, build trust between consumers and service providers, and ultimately promote inclusion of traditionally underserved and unserved communities in the country. The Philippines appears to be poised or appears poised to become a world leader in the use of financial technology or fintech due to several drivers, in my opinion. First, the geography of the Philippines, a nation of 7,000 islands, demands an alternative to traditional brick and mortar infrastructure. Second, the population is definitely young and mobile savvy with a median age of 25 years old, a mobile subscription rate of 100%, and an internet penetration of around two-thirds of the population. Third, the Philippines is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. As a result, this young population is increasingly prosperous, driving the demand for financial services. Fourth, the Philippines has a maturing sector of fintech startups working across various verticals, including mobile payments, remittances, online lending, and small and medium-sized enterprise financing. And finally, the country's financial sector regulators, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or the BSP, and the Philippine Securities and Exchange Commission, are supportive of the growth of the fintech and have taken proactive steps to help develop the industry. Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas has been in the forefront and has been instrumental in the age of the digital transformation for the Philippines with its thrust to drive financial inclusion for all. In view of this, BSP has identified the responsible promotion of fintech as a priority of BSP agenda. Under this agenda, the BSP strikes a right balance between enabling useful innovations and managing associated risk, and pursues a fintech roadmap covering collaborative engagements, commensurate regulations, and capacity building. From the release of the guidelines allowing electronic money issuers way back in 2009 to the recognition of virtual currencies and the regulation of virtual currency exchanges in 2017 as a form of remittance service, to the adoption of the National Quick Response Code standard for payment and financial services under the National Retail Payment System framework, to providing requirements and guidelines relating to customer due diligence or KYC, record keeping, and reporting of covered and suspicious transactions, to even providing guidelines on the establishment of digital banks, which we'll discuss later, which endeavors to promote an enabling regulatory environment that allows responsible innovation to flourish, promotes cyber resilience, and contribute to advancing the digitalization of the financial industry. There is no doubt that BSP is at the forefront of the Philippines' digital transformation. Continuous advancement of information and communication technology and the globalization of the financial markets have facilitated an innovative financial environment which involved the proliferation of online lending and financing companies, providing accessible and fast credit to the vast majority of mobile-savvy Filipinos. Consequently, our SEC has been active in issuing regulations aimed to protect the public. The SEC also recognized innovation in the capital markets and acknowledged the growth of this financial innovation in raising funds. In 2019, the SEC formulated the rules governing crowdfunding. Thanks to the SEC, crowdfunding is now an option for startups and SMEs. Zooming into blockchain, 2019 has seen the monumental release by the SEC of the proposed digital asset exchange rules to govern digital asset exchanges in accordance with the Securities Regulations Code that would work toward the development of the Philippine financial market, allowing to access in a safe, transparent, reliable, and cost-effective manner, while also ensuring and managing the investors' settlement risk and market discovery. Clearly, to close, the BSP and SEC foresee that the digital future will continue to disrupt traditional boundaries, introduce exciting opportunities, as well as a host of emerging threats and risks. As technology continues to change the face of the financial service industry, striking the right balance between promoting financial innovation on one hand and consumer protection, security, and financial stability on the other will be our challenge. The government and the private sector must work together in seeing to it that this vision turns to reality. There must be a tight grip on how development takes place and how soon everyone concerned in this development throws in their full and non-revocable support. After all, in a world where digital is the new normal, financial technology should be considered the bedrock of digital services. In the end, the Filipinos will be the prime beneficiaries, which is the ultimate objective. Thank you. Back to you, Ida.
Yeah, that's a quite a thorough speech, Attorney Mark. You practically summarized it all. You mentioned about technology making lives better. You're mentioning about it's the age of transition, turning into a new economy. You mentioned about Philippines being globally competitive, mobile savvy, young population, supportive regulators. Again, let me repeat, you did mention Philippines being globally competitive. I really have a few questions for you, but let's tackle that later on. I want to tackle, are we really globally competitive? So we'll pause on that for the moment. Thank you again. Our next panel speaker has over a decade of I beg your pardon, of supervisory experience in the BSP. Mr. Plabasan has not only witnessed the dramatic advancement of technology in the Philippine financial sector, but more importantly, he has played a key role in reshaping the regulatory mindset towards a more progressive approach on technology risk and innovation supervision. He has taken a highly critical and challenging role in the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas as head of the department primarily responsible for the supervision of technology and cybersecurity risk. Including emerging technologies, he continues to spearhead various cybersecurity reforms aimed at enhancing the BSP's cybersecurity oversight and supervision, as well as promoting secure and cyber-resilient financial ecosystem through close coordination and partnership with industry associations, regulatory counterparts, and other relevant stakeholders. It is a pleasure to have with us BSP's expert in tech, risk, and innovation, Mr. Melchor Plabasan. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Ida. Yeah, I think you wanted, this panel requires us to talk about the initiatives of the BSP, and I would like to thank Mark for the comprehensive enumeration of the initiatives of the BSP to promote flexibility and to promote openness in the financial system. And you're right, Ida, the shift towards digital payment, it's not just digital payment actually, it's doing everything digitally has become an imperative. It's very important as physical distancing rules have become the norm in the new economy arrangement. And this only has amplified or has emphasized what the BSP has been working on for almost a decade now, which is we really wanted to democratize access to financial services. We really want to address exclusion. That's why, the momentum is here. We need to sustain this momentum, and that's why we recently crafted what we call a digital payments transformation roadmap, which espouses really, it's not just a whole of government, but a whole of society approach to shift 50% of retail payments into digital form and to ensure that 70% of Filipino adults have access to a transaction account. So that said, the roadmap includes the usual, the enabling regulatory environment. It also tackles about the required engagement among key stakeholders, private sector, other agencies like the SEC, probably NTC, and of course, we are strongly supporting PLCs on the national ID. It also addresses communication plan. How do we ensure that the Filipino consumers, have the right, in terms of having, financial and digital literacy. And of course, the roadmap also includes the BSP's own digital transformation because as you know, the BSP operates the real-time gross settlement system, which is a critical element of our retail and finance ecosystem. That's why we also need to modernize that aspect. And we are one with everyone in pushing for a safe, efficient, and vibrant digital economy for the Philippines. That's all, Ida, for my initial statement.
Thank you, Mel. Yeah, certainly. In fact, at the forefront of all this, it's really been BSP pushing for the last 10 years. You are correct. And yes, the COVID has indeed accelerated what BSP has been doing. I'd love to already ask you some questions on some of the work being done, the national ID, literacy, and that sort of thing. But we'll keep that for the moment. We'll continue on until we complete all the speakers' speech. All right, next up is a U.S. educated with over 30 years experience in business and corporate sector. Her stint includes experience doing international business and market development, including general corporate management and operations. She has been involved in tech startups focusing on mobile platform and emerging technologies in virtual reality, augmented reality, and 3D since 2013. She's a co-founder of a digital transformation platform using VR and 3D technologies for the real estate industry under homespace360.com. Also involved as board advisory with startup fintech company JustPay.to. This payment gateway simplifies transactions not just for bills payments, e-commerce, peer-to-peer payment, serving as a secured conduit between payer and the payee. She has deep knowledge of multicultural and socio-economic dynamics of various international markets in Asia, Europe, Middle East during the past 20 years. And most of all, she's a mom with two beautiful daughters. Please welcome Ms. Gemma Guerrero. Kindly tell us more about your fintech background and exciting updates happening in your area, of course, relating to the topic. Ms. Gemma?
Thank you, Ida. I appreciate the introduction. And first of all, I want to thank Singapore FinTech Festival and honored to be part of this panel with Attorney Mark, BSP Director Plabasan, and SEC Commissioner for being part of this panel. Okay, yes, I am a mother of two. In fact, I just got here I'm actually out of the country right now. I'm in the US. And so I want to greet everyone. I hope everyone's staying safe. Okay, my tech background really started with my husband about, I would say, 20 years back in the emerging technology. So I would say we're actually beyond the curve in terms of investing as a tech entrepreneur. But in 2016, when the founders of JustPay.to actually sought advice from my husband about software development, he actually got very interested in the platform. So full disclosure, my husband is actually one of the lead investors with JustPay.to. And I just started, because my background is pretty much managing startups, I started mentoring the group a little bit. And then I think by the third year, they were really growing and they've asked me to join as CEO, and which I did. I joined the CEO of JustPay.to July of this year. And within the 9 months of this year, we've actually grown quite extensively, very impressively. And I would say that JustPay.to is listed right now as one of the top 20 by the FinTech Philippine News, which is very exciting for us. It gives us very validity. And also, I think I provide a different perspective with the panel being the private sector, the one joining from the startup and applying for the licenses with the BSP, which, you know, it was quite a learning experience. So I have some wish list actually for companies like me in the fintech space. So we're very excited, and I'm looking forward to a bullish 2020 despite the pandemic. Actually, we have, like Attorney Mark has said, you know, I think the fintech space will give the economy a boost and start resurging and reopening the country. So thank you, Ida.
Right. Already, again, I have quite a few questions regarding JustPay.to when you guys started and that sort of thing. And already you're on the top 20. But again, let's put a hold on that one. I'm also eager to hear about your wish list. I believe it's the same as my wish list too. Okay, so our final speaker, we are privileged to have with us as our next panel speaker. He is currently the Supervising Commissioner for the Markets and Securities Regulation Department and Economic Research and Training Department of the Philippines Securities and Exchange Commission. Before joining SEC, Com Amatong was an Assistant Secretary of Department of Finance, where he had an active role also in a number of public-private partnerships, such as the NAIA Expressway project and the automated fare collection system. He also served in various capacities in the government, namely Vice President of PDIC, and had a stint with the National Power Corporation, as well as acting chair of the Local Water Utilities and Administration, among others. Before joining the government, Mr. Amatong was an associate of the famous Villarasa and Angkanko Law Office, where he had dealt with high-profile litigation cases. Mr. Amatong was admitted to the Philippine Bar in 2002 and New York Bar in 2007. He holds Masters of Law degree, also an international finance concentration from Harvard Law School. So without further ado, and by the way, he's a cum laude of the UP Economics. Without further ado, we have with us Commissioner, I'm so used to calling you F, but let me complete the full name. Ephyro Luis Amatong, kindly tell us again about your fintech background and exciting things happening at the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Thank you very much, Ida, for that very generous introduction. Please feel free to call me F. My parents followed the Philippine tradition of making up names for their children, so I have a very unusual first name even for a Filipino. But feel free to call me F. I think taking off from what our colleagues on the panel said, and especially Mark's keynote, 2020, I think everyone would agree, 2020 has been a very interesting and challenging year, very unexpectedly challenging year for all of us. And that's been both good and bad, I think, for FinTech. In the case of the SEC, we've had 2020 disrupt some of our plans. So I think Mark, Mel, and yourself, Ida, many people have been awaiting our efforts at coming up with our digital asset exchange and digital asset offering rules, which are really in the final stages. Luckily, we were able to get our crowdfunding rules out in 2019, and we're processing about two to four applicants with respect to crowdfunding, and we're still hopeful that we'll have our first one or two crowdfunding licensees within 2020. But the reality is, with all of the disruptions of the pandemic, many of our operations and our plans for 2020 had to be adjusted, especially as we move towards pandemic response as a higher priority. But the interesting thing, I think, and this is an observation that I have to attribute to another colleague, the CFO of Ayala Land, Toti Bengson. In another panel earlier this year, he pointed out that the thing that's probably the strongest component or the strongest push for digitalization and moving online and using technology to do things more efficiently, as Mark pointed out, has really not been any internal corporate driver, but the pandemic itself and the challenges we faced in 2020. And we've also seen that in the SEC, in a welcome development towards the third and fourth quarter of this year, we've had two use cases of proof of concept of use of distributed ledger technology in order to facilitate securities distribution. This is what Mark was talking about, providing more inclusive access to financial products and access to investments for our countrymen. So we had this successful launch of an app, a mobile and online app called bonds.ph, developed by a company called PDAX with support from Union Bank. And together, this platform, this bonds.ph platform, successfully helped our Philippine Bureau of Treasury distribute online two series of bonds, Retail Treasury Bond 24, RTB 24, and most recently the Premio bonds recently issued by the Bureau of Treasury. So we have actual proof of concept of use of distributed ledger technology in order to provide access to investment to our countrymen, both in the Philippines and across the world. So this is one of the benefits of the bonds.ph app. It was accessible to interested investors worldwide over a range of countries, more than 20 countries. And most recently, on the side of the private sector, we have this initial proof of concept of a similar platform, again, using distributed ledger technology to support the back end of a private bond distribution by one of our large banks, Union Bank, through a platform developed in partnership with Standard Chartered. So even in the midst of the pandemic, you can see innovation and fintech responding to the challenge successfully, even with the disruptions that we faced. And both the BSP and Director Mel and the SEC were involved in supporting both of these efforts. So I think it's a correct assessment to say that we're going to see acceleration in the fintech space as we now develop and move out of the pandemic. Back to you, Edna.
Thank you, F. We can start with the Q&A already. And before you leave, F, I may forget this because you've mentioned about distributed ledger several times. So we're actually referring to blockchain. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. Blockchain is something that we've been talking about for many years. There are many possible use cases.
Yes.
Most people, when they hear blockchain, they think right away coins, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Bitcoin. But what we've seen successfully in these two use cases, two different separate use cases, with bonds.ph powered by PDAX and this new platform developed by Standard Chartered and Union Bank, is the use of distributed ledger technology to support the back end.
Yeah.
So in both cases, they're really used to facilitate order taking, which is something that isn't as necessarily as sexy sounding as a coin, but very, very important. If you want to really reach people and allow them to invest, to be able to use a mobile app for an OFW in Singapore or Ireland to use their phone and download an app and invest in the future of their country by subscribing to a retail treasury bond or a Premio bond. That's a very concrete use case of distributed ledger technology. The technology used by Union Bank more recently, separate from bonds.ph, is less visible, but I think just as potentially just as revolutionary. They undertook a proof of concept of their DLT platform as a parallel run to a conventional distribution of the 9 billion peso bond issuance. And it's very encouraging. The results are very encouraging.
Yeah. Well, so I suppose that's on a sandbox approach. But let me, you don't have to answer that, ComF, because while SEC is doing something out of the box, so is Bangko Sentral. So this is for Mel, no? There is recent information about data connectivity agreement between the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the Monetary Authority of Singapore. That sounds exciting. Can you brief us about this, and how can this help businesses?
Yeah, of course, the BSP and MAS fully recognize the role of responsible use of data when it comes to developing our financial sector. And when we say development of our financial sector, it's not just the local market either, right? It's also the global economy that we are talking about. So that particular agreement with MAS covers sharing of best practices and even policies that are supportive of seamless and secure flow of information. So among institutions that are supervised by the BSP and MAS. And we both agree, the BSP and AMS both agreed that we won't impose any data localization or data sovereignty requirement because of their potential to impede innovation and to impede development. Of course, but this has to be subject to certain data privacy, AML, and cybersecurity protocols. That's really the essence of the recent agreement.
Okay, well, what's the macro behind this? What are we? What's one of, if you can reveal at this point, like one exciting feature of this connectivity agreement with MAS?
It's really to support local institutions to participate in the global economy. It's to ensure that they can seamlessly and safely transmit data to so initially to Singapore and hopefully in other parts of the world, and there won't be any regulation or law that would impede that seamless flow of data or information.
Nice. Nice. I have a follow-through question on that, but let me go through with other questions first. This time with Gemma. Okay. Are there any regulatory hurdles your business need to overcome to access customers in the Philippines? I mean, what support in terms of infrastructure, regulations need in order to become stronger and more robust? I guess we're talking already about your wish list. This is the time to actually mention it.
Yes. Well, actually, it's a very good question, because coming from a startup, I'm a very good example of a use case for companies getting into the fintech space. For our company, I can speak for our experience. It took us over a year to get the BSP license. I do agree, however, that there should be strict compliance. There should be, a robust regulatory mandate required by the BSP for people getting into the fintech space, because it's not just about offering innovative technologies, it's also about integrity and longevity of the company who wants to compete in this industry. So I totally agree with the compliance and all this. It's a barrier to entry, I would say. So it kind of like separates the boys from the men. Now, in terms of support, I would say, okay, again, I'm speaking from our experience. I think when the fintech space started evolving, the granting or the approval of the licenses, I would say for others who would be coming into the industry, I think the BSP could help kind of like provide more specifics. Educate. There has to be a little bit of evangelization, licenses the companies need for the platform they're going to do, whether it's remittances or bill payments, prepare them, because we have to capitalize as a company, right? So the licenses is part of the funding. The requirements to prepare for the capital budget. And my wish list, I would say that I think the government should help support the industry, especially the startups where, you know, they can actually, I don't know if you can mandate, but to kind of like now with the COVID, I think, you know, despite the COVID, I think it's a catalyst because people now need social distancing guidelines. Having a cashless transaction, I think, is very important, especially for industries like the transportation, you know, tourism. I mean, payment using cashless transaction. And we have that feature at JustPay.to. I'm very proud that we're very proactive in doing that. We pretty much understand the pain points of how bills are being paid, people lining up at Bayad Center, or, you know, now with the COVID, I think with the barcode, or these are features that we can leverage using our software. And I think companies are doing that now. But with JustPay.to, I have to say, you know, we're an all-in-one. We have a complete ecosystem working with the banks because we are not actually a wallet and we are not a mobile app. We really are a gateway, and we can work. We're agnostic. We're frictionless. We work with all the banks, the wallets, the mobile apps out there to connect them. So really, when Attorney Mark talked about inclusion, our value proposition really is democratization. We're allowing people access, having a payment address. So that's where we're unique. So my wish list is also having the government probably incentivize investors and VC group in the country to have tax incentives so they can invest on startups. And, you know, this can push the innovation, the Filipinos, and entrepreneurship, and, you know, let them take more risk if there are like incentives as well, a reward risk parameters, you know, by the government. I mean, those are my wish list. And I think with the explosion, with 200, from the report, there are 200 fintech companies already. And I think this, I don't know, we'll see how the regulation will evolve from there, right?
Very, very interesting. And this is actually a good venue to introduce Attorney Mark, because Attorney Mark has done a fair bit of work in terms of leveling up and scaling up a few startups that have gone quite successful. So to Attorney Mark, I understand you are actually the foremost tech and fintech lawyer in the Philippines. To be able to answer some of the wish list of Gemma, would you mind advising how competitive is Philippines compared to the global market?
Okay, thanks, Ida. So yeah, well, for me, I think, in my opinion, in terms of market, market competitiveness globally, we could say, or probably as a matter of fact, that the Philippines is probably a late bloomer when it comes to fintech. But while the Philippines has one of the highest, as stated earlier, highest mobile and internet penetration in the world, and an equally large percentage of our population still remains unbanked and underbanked. And you know, they generally prefer to transact in physical cash. But of course, when you combine this, Ida, with situation with increasing incomes, rising popularity of digital e-commerce, and especially now, no, and the social distancing measures that are forced upon us by this pandemic, I guess we all arrive at this ripe opportunity where FinTech's use case in the Philippines enters an accelerator phase. But of course, also, siguro not to belabor the point, in terms of FinTech regulations, I could say that the Philippines is at par with well-known FinTech jurisdictions. I'm just amazed with how the BSP and also how the SEC have evolved, and how they have adopted, which, like before, as a legal practitioner, would just be, you know, would be just, I could just imagine or just thought that they could release these regulations. But here we are today, and that's why I guess we're having this World FinTech Festival, because we're at the forefront of this innovations and emerging technologies.
Yeah, thank you, Attorney Mark. Yes, Philippines has been a late bloomer, no, and this is where I'm gonna go back to F in terms of you know, the world, and a lot of the cities or countries have already implemented the digital asset initial coin offering and what have you. The bond is a form of funding mechanism, and funding is one of the key, because of course cash is king, so to speak. where is SEC stand on the digital assets in terms of that legislation? I know you mentioned that there's already a draft format and it may happen in the next few months, but this I feel will get more of the FDIC in if we can implement this. Is that your position as well? And when? I mean, if that's okay with you to ask, actually, specifically when?
Yeah, no, I got this. I was asked this question last year, and I was very confident in saying that we were going to get first half. And then suddenly the pandemic let loose, and we had to reprioritize, right? But having said that, I would agree, and I think even more than facilitating international investment, we've really been looking at fintech, things like, for example, crowdfunding or like digital asset exchange, tokenization, as technological catch-up tools, especially for providing finance and ease. So that's why the digital asset and fintech for SME financing initiative, if I can broaden it beyond digital assets, and definitely digital assets is one of the mechanisms that we think we can use to provide alternative modes of funding for SMEs in a cost-effective manner. But even before the pandemic, as Mark was pointing out, the Philippines still has a very large unbanked population.
Yes.
And the question came, what can we do, not so much to disrupt existing, but to make the intermediation or to match possible investors with possible investees or entrepreneurs like Gemma. What can we do to make it more efficient as an alternative source to the traditional stock market or bond market? So we were very motivated already before the pandemic. The pandemic just makes everything more urgent to move online. So again, we are thinking of first, we have the crowdfunding rules out. And we think we will have use cases out very soon. That's what I'm more confident about.
Yep.
Even in the last month of 2020, I'm still confident that either within the year or within the first quarter of next year, we will have crowdfunding use cases out, and that will help provide funding platforms for SMEs. The DAO and the DAE, initially the challenge there is we had a whole protocol. I think Mel had a similar protocol when they evaluated the virtual currency exchange. Generally, as regulators, normally we like to come into your office and so-called kick the tires. You want to check where are the servers, how does it actually function, who are your personnel. We want to meet the people that are launching these new markets. None of these things are now practical given the pandemic. So we have to rethink how we do the regulatory assessment using technology as well and doing it from a distance. Where we are becoming more confident is the success of these two initial DLT use cases. They're not yet full digital asset exchanges or digital asset distributions. But they show a mechanism by which we can cut up the assessment process into pieces, bite-sized pieces. And I think we know our partners or the people behind both Bonds.ph and this Union Bank facility, and we know there are other similar proponents, have goals and ambitions beyond what we're doing today. And if we can find a way to do the assessment in stages like this, then we're closer to launching our DAO, digital asset offering and digital asset exchange rules. Those are still very much priorities of the Commission and priorities of the chairman himself. So not only do I get the question from fintech advocates like yourselves, I get that question from the chairman of the SEC. When are we going to launch these rules? No. So I can assure you, we remain committed. We are just rethinking now how to do this practically given the pandemic.
Right. I want to be efficient on this because hand in hand, when it comes to all of these changes, I just kind of want to ask you again, just to complete this. How about cybercrimes? What's SEC doing to curb this? Because the more we are on the digital space, especially when
Yes.
you implement the DAO and DAE, those are actually expected. How
Yeah.
are you handling that?
So we actually are building up a partnership. The Department of Information Communication Technology, the ICT, has actually reached out to us about cybersecurity and cybercrime protocols. We're also for existing online scams. We've been working successfully with both the PNP and the NBI anti-cybercrime units. Not to give too much away, but our first approach as the SEC when it comes to online fraud is investor protection, investor education. So
Okay,
our
yes.
we launched this year is our SEC information and investor education campaign, which we call our campaign network. Working with other groups like FinTech's, like the Philippine Institute of CPAs. We want to make people more aware because it's in the case of financial fraud, it's very true that an ounce of prevention is much worth much more than a pound of cure. If you
Yeah,
can avoid the scam,
yeah.
so
Prevention is better than cure. Yeah.
so our we have a program called Check with Sec, and we are now not only on our website but on Facebook. If anyone is being offered a financial investment package and you're not sure if it looks too good to be true, if they're offering a return that's astronomical over a short period of time, we're encouraging everyone to what we call check with SEC. Come onto our online portal, find out if these investments are registered with the SEC and if
Yes.
they're authorized. So that's our first line of defense.
Okay.
But the other thing, without giving too much away, if you're using online resources to scam people or defraud people, it turns out that you leave a lot of digital fingerprints. So not to give too much away,
Traceable.
but we are becoming more, we and our partners in law enforcement are becoming more and more confident that we can find you, and we can find your money, and we will shut you down.
Thank you. Thank you, F. And this is where I want to give the question to Gemma relating to that. How are you guys? You're into payments. You're kind of like a one-stop shop. Surely you're also encountering cyber crimes. How are you? How can people trust your platform, and how can the regulators help you in that regard?
Okay, with JustPay.to, actually, like I said earlier, we're actually not a wallet, so we don't keep the money.
I see.
We're a gateway. And that's, I think, one of our value proposition. And our gateway is having your own URL. In other words, one payment address. So that's ultimately our strategic goal, is to give every Filipino their own payment address, because you don't need an app, you don't need big data, and you don't need the Wi-Fi pretty much. You know, we are trying to tap the unbanked in the country, which with 100 million Filipinos, like almost 80% have no bank accounts. So this is one way also to help the country get uplifted. So we're actually excited in, you know, trying to launch that by next year through the government agencies.
Right. Which again, perfect was my point to a question to Mel, is the unprecedented growth of the Philippines finance sector because of the adoption of traditional and non-traditional means. And with this, you recently approved online, or should I say digital banking, which should be able to help the unbanked and unserved communities. Could you just give us, if you don't mind, Mel, just a minute or two about this?
Sorry, I was on mute. Anyway, as mentioned by Ida, yeah, it was, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago, the monetary board has approved our digital banking circular. In fact, that's one of the primary enablers of our digital payment transformation roadmap, together with the open banking circular, which we will expose probably within the week. So again, it provides, it focuses on the specific requirements of digital banks. I mean, those banks that would process their transactions digitally end to end. So there will be no branches. We provided the specific capital requirement for this. Of course, we also understand that any digital bank, the operation of any digital bank is underpinned by robust, by resilient, secure technology infrastructure. Hence, there's special focus on that. But also, digital banks are also subject to this. I mean, because they are also subject to the same credit, liquidity risk. So some applicable BSP regulations would also be would also be complied by the digital bank. And again,
okay,
yes, Ida.
Sir, I want to segue a bit because I may forget this because last year in this Singapore FinTech Festival, group of central bankers of the world were talking about, the topic was, do we even need central bank? Do we even need regulators in the future? So that's kind of controversial, but what's your take on that, Mel? And then F, would you mind?
Yeah,
and of course, Attorney Mark, yes.
Yeah, very controversial. I think I was able to answer this particular question in yesterday's panel, and my take on this is that you need regulation. Regulation is a necessary pill, let's say, to ensure sustainable growth when dealing with innovation. So again, in the last, I mean, if you will remember the financial crisis that the world has encountered in the past, right? One of the primary lessons in those crises is that there's really the financial regulation really plays a crucial role in ensuring, I mean, in instilling trust, in ensuring that that growth will be sustained. And I believe that, I mean, if you leave it to market forces, I mean, market forces will not always ensure efficient and equitable distribution of wealth and opportunities.
Gotcha.
That's why we really need. But again, the regulators also have to digitally transform themselves. The regulators also need to, let's say, to evolve and to adapt technology in order to make regulation supervision more efficient.
Attorney Mark, do you have something added to that?
So the question is if we need BSP.
Yeah.
And while I'm in front of the BSP, of course the answer is we need. I'll say that the answer is yes. We need, of course, regulators, especially in front of Direct Mel and Com Amatong. But seriously, briefly, Ida. But like in our firm, we closely work with both the private and the public sectors. To really promote these emerging technologies and, of course, promote also responsible fintech innovation. So, medyo important for both private and public to be there, especially the regulators.
Okay, and just few words, ComF, about this.
Yeah, I think Gemma answered this question a while ago. She said it was very important for the public to be able to distinguish between who are legitimate fintechs who provide a service like JustPay.to and some unknown fly-by-night, completely non-existent scam. And she called it, barrier to entry. I just like to add the licensing function. Maybe you'd think about it as a protective barrier to entry to protect the public and to protect the legitimate fintech providers from people who really have no good intentions. So I think that was the correct answer Gemma gave a while ago.
Yeah. So really, it boils down to the trust. We barely have 3 minutes to go. So in 2 sentences, Gemma, Mel, Mark, and F, what's fintech future outlook?
I start, ladies
Yes,
first.
please, Gemma.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, we're for the Philippines, we're very excited. I think now that like we said with the COVID, there's some setback, but I think it opened a lot of opportunities. They say there's don't let any crisis, deter you, especially for the entrepreneurs. There are solutions out there, and I think fintech is spearheading the way, and we're very excited to be in this space, and we're very bullish for 2021.
Okay.
Thank
Mel?
you.
Thank you, Gemma.
Yeah,
Mel?
yeah. For me, Ida, it's more of an outlook and a wish at the same time. So from the perspective of the BSP, we hope to be able to see a digital finance ecosystem where both incumbents and startups thrive in an efficient, safe, secure, and a vibrant digital economy. We also, I think, Commissioner F would also agree that we hope, I mean, given the crucial role of regulator, we hope that regulators and policymakers will continue to wear their multiple hats. I mean, hats as supervisors and at the same time enablers and catalysts for change at the. And that's our wish and outlook.
Thank you. Vision outlook. Yes. Attorney Mark?
Yeah, Ida. So probably me, I'll give a more broader answer, probably as a tech or fintech practitioner. So what's my fintech outlook for 2021? So I'm sure like everyone knows because of this pandemic, the fintech ecosystem literally leapfrog, due to this pandemic. But I believe 2021 promises to be another big year for fintech. So for me, for 2021, I see four. So I guess you'll also agree with me, Ida. I think I could see bigger M&A deals involving fintech companies. So when we say M&A deals for 2021 and beyond, I think that these are legitimate. These are deals involving companies with proven business models and clear paths to profitability. Right, that's one. Number two. I guess, as mentioned several times in this talk, the rise of the neo or the neo banks or the digital banks, no? Of course, with the release of the BSP's rule on digital banking, I personally expect the rapid development of digital banking regimes and the use of such license to deliver various services to the underserved or unserved segments of the population. Third, I also foresee, and also in legal practice, their product expansion, no? with several fintech players. So I could see progressive fintechs and challenger banks, meaning the non-traditional, the other banks, the smaller banks, will continue to expand and their services and offerings, no, to the public. And lastly, which you also mentioned, that's also in my outlook, cybersecurity. I guess with increasing use of data, everyone now is into tech. So I think, and such cybersecurity is seen as a key risk for these companies. So offering such digital services, so there will be the rise of cybersecurity fintech solutions will become very attractive, I guess, as a business. Thank you, Ida.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Attorney
everyone.
Mark. And ComF, please.
Yeah, I think like Director Mel, I have an outlook and a wish. I think fintech's going to move faster, and I think we're going to see more proof of concept in 2021. So that's both an outlook and a wish on my part.
All right. So just to wrap it off, unprecedented acceleration of fintech has been brought by this pandemic. We are seeing that it's necessary to do collaboration and cooperation between the private and the public sector. And we are happy to say that Philippines has got a robust regulators, as you can see here. And we know and we feel on a part of the wish list as well that Philippines will be one of the central when it comes to fintech and digitalization. So thank you very much. We have wonderful speakers. Gemma, thank you. Mel, thank you. Attorney Mark, ComF, thank you so much. I wish we had longer time. I'm sure there's still lots of things to discuss, but our time's finished. So thank you all. We see you at the next panel.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays.